So we're here with MediumTV today, Free Press Unlimited. We're going to talk to the director, Leon Willems, about problems of the media today, the problems of the future, and what the work they do is about.
So my name is Leon Willems and I'm director of Free Press Unlimited. I work in the area of press freedom since 2003. Before that I was editor in a television program in the Netherlands on a public broadcaster. Free Press Unlimited, I always say, is a press freedom organization that works by developing projects in association with partners in countries where information is hardly available. Trustworthy, fact-based, journalistic, newsworthy information is hardly available. So that means that we are, as an organization, we are project developers. We work with partners in countries of war, countries of transition, countries where democracy is under threat, countries where repression exists, and we're trying to find ways in which journalists from those areas can better serve their audiences. So that is what we do. As a group of people, we are journalists, we're media activists, we're freedom of expression supporters, and people who are dedicated to create a better world. And we honestly believe that journalism is not just a necessary element of democracy, but journalism is actually an act of democracy. It's creating a public conversation that societies need to develop. It is very problematic. We can honestly say that currently media is in crisis, media in general, but specifically that journalism function that I was describing just now, that journalism is a public conversation that equals, with democracy. I mean, in democracy, people express their opinions by voting, and it is very hard to see how that public conversation, based on fact-based information, can take place without information. But that is originating from, quality journalism. The problem is, at the moment, is that there's a lot of threats to journalism. Journalism is really in an economic crisis, and that is because the advertisement and revenue models of the current media markets do not support quality journalism. It is in crisis because increasingly we see governments acting unfavorable to independent, free-minded media. There's a whole wave of, let's say, authoritarian rule coming up where media is basically seen as an enemy to government, and where media is seen as a polarizing factor as a result of that. I think one of the most important projects that we help to create is trying to use the power, the energy and the quality of real good investigative independent journalism to address the misinformation and disinformation that is coming from Russia, to destroy the credibility of the European Union. So we have a project to develop the quality of Eastern European independent journalists, to do something about the massive disinformation campaigns. We believe that the true value of journalism is in creating fact-based journalism. We see also that a lot of governments think that the way to address this is by countering disinformation with their own propaganda. We don't believe that it's effective. We believe, and facts more or less show that that is true, that truly independent, trustworthy journalism has more public support, more public trust than counter-propaganda. Because in the end of the day, if you repay propaganda with counter-propaganda, then you're not ethically based. The problem is that a lot of that fact-based journalism doesn't reach the audiences because independent journalists are working in small and medium-sized medium outlets and we see that a lot of the broadcasting scene in Europe is really captured by business owners who are favorable to the authoritarian rulers. That is, for example, the problem in Hungary. There are many threats like that also in Turkey, in Russia. And so we see that the diversity, the pluriformity of quality journalism that is available for the public is eroding. In other words, the quality journalism is a small drop in a very wide ocean of information, of which a lot is unverified, gossip-based, or deliberate disinformation efforts. So we need to augment the reach and the distribution of quality information to give it more power.
Yes.
Well, I think that we, as an organization, but I think it's also an experience that is a very European experience, I should add, is that the good quality information can come from public funded broadcasting systems. I personally do not think that there are many things to say about public broadcasting in the Netherlands, but journalism standards are abided by in the public broadcasting system. Some people criticize that and say this is state funded or government funded and only commercial media can provide quality information. The fact is that different experiences show that we need a mixed, diverse media system in order to provide citizens with a reliable media landscape. For example, in Czechia, the Czech Republic, the commercial media have been captured by the current person in charge of the state. So the public broadcasting in the Czech Republic is actually a wall of quality opposing this captured media. In Hungary, the public media system was captured by Orban very early on. And it was the commercial media that actually provided a last resort. RTL television in Hungary had a very good news broadcast that is currently under threat. And so I think that you cannot say that public funded or government supported media necessarily will always be wrong.
Yes.
What we need is institutional guarantees, market guarantees, regulatory guarantees that the public has choice, that quality standards are upheld, that there is a regulatory framework that favors quality journalism over propaganda and gossip. Well, I think that this is still very true today. We live in a society where individual celebrity has become a very important commodity in order to grasp the imagination of audiences.
Yeah.
Of course, like any tool that media makers use, journalists use, it has its upsides and it has its downsides. You use celebrity or things that are in the public eye, you have a bigger audience. The problem is, I think, that there's no equilibrium in the market at the moment. In 1980, it was still very possible to make a decent living. News was profitable. You could run a newspaper, give employment to a range of quality journalists, and still have a profitable operation. That today has come increasingly under threat. So a lot of the print industry has actually trended towards conglomerates.
Yes.
And so we see the demise of local journalism. Local newspapers in developed democracies have eroded and not much has come in its place, which means that a lot of the national newspapers, and this is a trend actually that I think is underestimated in its democracy effects, is that the public feels alienated by capital, capital as in the capital city oriented news. In the Netherlands, for example, I know this because of my experience in broadcasting system in the Netherlands, that a lot of the people who are not living in Amsterdam, Utrecht, Den Haag, or Rotterdam feel that the entire media scene is focused only on these four cities, and that what happens in Groningen or Limburg is not that important. This creates social tension, social division. I think to a large extent the demise of local journalism has contributed to the fact that the crisis in Groningen related to the gas exploitation there, natural gas exploitation, which led to earthquakes, has been underreported for a couple of years, and it creates fury in the people there about this, the people in the West, and you see that element of alienation, yes, of non-urban societies in countries as diverse as Nigeria, the United States, and Bangladesh. So in poor countries this system is at work, and I think it's a problem. We want the media system, and we want journalism to be representative and inclusive, yes, not just of those that make decisions in the layers of government and a small circle of people who are influencers around it, whether it's celebrity or a quality journalist or elite journalist. We want people to feel that their problems are reported on, and that the political sphere relates to those problems and acts on them. And that is a big problem. We call that the social accountability function of journalism has eroded with the demise of local journalism.
Yes.
People turn to social media platforms more and more for a number of reasons. First of all, let's say social media platforms have replaced a human need for connection and connectivity. So they've been very important. I also think that we should not look one-dimensionally. People who criticize Facebook have to also acknowledge that in many countries Facebook has opened up the freedom of expression space for many people to take part in the public conversation. The problem lies with the fact that currently social media platforms are also increasingly involved in spiraling and adding hate speech on social media platforms, and increasingly are fostering, let's say, falsehoods over fact-based journalism. And we think that is an algorithmic problem that social media platforms have. They seem to, most research shows that algorithms seem to favor polarization and not favor a public conversation based on facts. That is a problem. And so one should look at the paradox there. There's more information available to people around the world than ever before. But the problem is with the quality of it, the factual basis of it, and that has led to an erosion of trust. I think it would be folly to kind of say, well, let's close the social media platforms, because they perform societal functions that are a response to a clear need. But there needs to be much more responsibility on the separation between fact and gossip, disinformation and true information, and fact-based and checked information. And I think that responsibility cannot come from the platforms themselves alone. There has to be some form of an engagement with the public, because it shows, all the research shows that people are unhappy about the increasing amount of fake news that is going around. So, but it's a double-edged sword. I think that technology and the social media platforms have also contributed to the ability of people to speak out their mind. And one does not want to lose that. It is a democratic right that did not exist in many countries. Problem is, how can we make this work in the public service of man, I would say. And women, of course, but man in the in the inclusive sense. I think that we need to have a stronger public voice to defend independent journalism. Many people are taking for granted that the independent press exists and do not always see how incredibly important that is for the function of democracy. And I think that we need to speak up more. We need to ask our governments to do more to protect independent journalism by a wider variety of mechanisms. We need fair markets. We cannot have one social media platform dominate the entire social media sphere. It's unhealthy. We cannot have the commercial media sphere being captured by just one company that has links to one party in a democratic system. We need political action to guarantee that that diverse, multifaceted, public service-oriented journalism can continue to exist. That is, I think, the biggest threat, the reluctance of politicians to understand that they need to provide the conditions under which independent journalism can exist. Now you see that a lot of governments want to regulate content, to regulate things that they don't like. That is not their job. Their job is to ensure that journalists from the various points of view, various angles, coming from different walks of life, can serve their audiences. That is, I think, the most immediate and urgent need, to see that this is an urgent requirement, that this is really defending public space. That is the most important thing that I think we need to focus on.
Well, that was quite an intense conversation. We have a lot to think about, and we hope you liked it.